At exactly 3:17 a.m., Ahmed's eyes snapped open in his London flat, his heart pounding with a terror he could not explain. The air in his room had turned ice cold, so frigid that his breath formed visible clouds in the darkness. As he lay frozen in bed, unable to move, he heard them, whispers in a language that seemed to crawl into his mind rather than enter through his ears. The shadows in the corner of his room seemed to shift and writhe, taking on shapes that defied all rational explanation. This nightmare had repeated itself every single night for 3 weeks, always at the same precise moment, always with the same bone-chilling presence that made every fiber of his being scream in silent terror. What Ahmed did not know was that he was making a single innocent mistake every night before bed, a mistake so common that millions of Muslims around the world are doing it right now, unknowingly opening doorways to the unseen realm and inviting forces beyond their comprehension into their most sacred spaces. Tonight, you are about to discover the hidden spiritual laws that govern the world after sunset, the mistakes that transform your bedroom into a gathering place for the jinn, and most importantly, the divine protections that can shield you from what prowls in the darkness. Before we journey into the realm beyond sight, seek refuge in Allah from the accursed devil, for your faith will be your only true defense against what you are about to learn. The mistake that Ahmed was making, the same mistake that countless others make every night without realizing it, is so deceptively simple that when I reveal it to you, you will immediately recognize it in your own life. For 28 nights, Ahmed had been going to bed the same way he always had, completing his evening prayers, brushing his teeth, checking his phone one last time, and then simply closing his eyes and hoping for peaceful sleep. But he was forgetting something crucial, something that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, never neglected, something that creates an invisible fortress around the believer that no evil can penetrate. Without this protection, Ahmed's bedroom had become a crossroads where the seen and unseen worlds intersected, where entities of smokeless fire could observe him in his most vulnerable state, where his dreams became battlegrounds and his sleep became a form of spiritual warfare he never knew he was fighting. The whispers that haunted Ahmed's nights were not products of his imagination or symptoms of sleep deprivation. They were the voices of beings who had taken notice of his unprotected state, who had been drawn to his room by signals he was unknowingly broadcasting every night. The freezing temperature was not a malfunction of his heating system, but the physical manifestation of their presence. For when the jinn manifest strongly in our realm, they often alter the very atmosphere around them. The paralysis he experienced, that terrifying inability to move or cry out for help, was their influence pressing down upon him like an invisible weight, testing the boundaries of what they could do to someone who had left their spiritual doors unlocked. As the sun sets and darkness embraces the earth like a vast, silent ocean, the boundaries between the seen and unseen worlds become permeable in ways that most of humanity never perceives. This is the hour when the jinn, those magnificent and terrible beings crafted by Allah from smokeless fire, emerge from their hidden dwellings to roam freely through our world. Unlike the gentle transition from day to night that we observe with our physical eyes, the spiritual realm undergoes a profound transformation as twilight deepens into darkness. The very fabric of reality shifts, creating pathways and openings that remain sealed during the bright hours of day. Our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, understood this cosmic truth with divine clarity when he warned the believers, "When evening comes, keep your children close, for the devils spread out at that time." These words were not spoken as folklore or cautionary tales to frighten the superstitious, but as precise guidance for navigating a spiritual reality that operates according to laws as fixed and immutable as the laws of physics. Just as we would not walk blindfolded across a busy highway, we should not navigate the night hours without understanding the unseen traffic that flows around us in the darkness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals this hidden truth in the noble Quran, with words that pierce through the veil of our limited perception. Indeed, He and His tribe see you from where you do not see them. This verse from Surah Al-Araf illuminates a reality that should fill every believer with both humility and urgent awareness. We are constantly observed by beings whose existence transcends our physical senses, beings who can perceive our every action, hear our every word, and witness our every moment of vulnerability or strength. Every moment after sunset, we share our homes, our streets, and our most intimate spaces with entities whose nature and capabilities far exceed our human understanding. They move through shadows like water flowing around stones, gathering in abandoned places where human remembrance of Allah has grown weak, and responding to certain sounds, actions, and spiritual states that act like beacons, broadcasting our location and condition across the unseen realm. The bathroom, that most private of spaces, becomes a crossroads between worlds where the jinn naturally congregate, which is precisely why our Prophet taught us to seek Allah's protection before entering. Empty rooms echo not just with the silence we perceive, but with conversations and activities we cannot detect. Mirrors in dim light become more than reflective surfaces. They transform into windows between dimensions, sometimes revealing glimpses of what exists beyond our normal sight. The darkness itself seems to breathe with their presence, and certain locations become magnetic gathering points where their activity intensifies. Graveyards after sunset carry an atmosphere thick with their movement. Abandoned buildings become their temporary dwellings. Crossroads and intersections mark territorial boundaries in their invisible kingdom. Even the corners of our own homes can become their observation posts when we fail to maintain proper spiritual hygiene through remembrance of Allah and adherence to prophetic guidance. But within this reality, that might seem overwhelming or terrifying, lies the most beautiful manifestation of Allah's infinite mercy and wisdom. Our Creator has not left us defenseless wanderers in a realm filled with unseen dangers. Through the blessed tongue of His final messenger, we have been given tools of protection more powerful than any physical weapon, more reliable than any earthly security system, and more effective than any human strategy. These tools are not complicated rituals accessible only to scholars or saints. They are simple acts of faith and remembrance, available to every sincere believer who chooses to implement them. The question that every Muslim must ask themselves is not whether the unseen world exists, for Allah and His Messenger have already confirmed this reality beyond any doubt. The question is whether we will live our lives prepared to navigate this reality with the spiritual armor our Creator has provided, or whether we will stumble through the darkness spiritually naked, wondering why our nights are filled with disturbance and our peace is constantly under attack. Ahmed's nightly torment was not unique or unusual. It was simply the natural consequence of leaving spiritual doors unlocked in a realm where such carelessness carries profound consequences. When we understand that our every action sends signals into the unseen world, our every habit creates spiritual atmospheres that either invite divine protection or allow harmful interference, we begin to comprehend why the Prophet never treated these matters as optional recommendations, but as essential survival skills for the soul. The London brother whose story opened our exploration was not experiencing random supernatural activity or psychological disturbance. Through careful examination of his nightly routine, guided by Islamic teachings about the unseen realm, we discovered that Ahmed was unknowingly sending 5 distinct invitations to the jinn every single night. These were not dramatic rituals performed in hidden ceremonies or forbidden practices learned from occult sources. They were seemingly innocent actions that millions of people perform without understanding their profound spiritual consequences. Habits so common and apparently harmless that most would never suspect their connection to the disturbances that followed. The first invitation that Ahmed was extending every night arrived through uncovered food and drink scattered throughout his flat. Our Prophet, peace be upon him, delivered a warning about this seemingly trivial matter with the gravity it deserves. Cover your vessels and tie your water skins, for there is a night in the year when plague descends, and it does not pass by an uncovered vessel without entering it. This hadith from Sahih Muslim reveals a spiritual principle that most modern Muslims have forgotten. Uncovered food and drink after sunset become more than mere physical substances. They transform into gathering points, meeting places, and sources of sustenance for beings whose interaction with our world operates according to laws we barely comprehend. That glass of water Ahmed kept by his bedside for convenience, the leftover dinner he left uncovered on his kitchen counter, the cup of tea that cooled on his desk while he finished work, each of these seemingly innocent items was broadcasting an invitation across the unseen realm, announcing to any jinn in the vicinity that hospitality was available, that the barriers of spiritual protection had been lowered, that this household operated without awareness of the invisible guests who might take advantage of such carelessness. When the jinn partake of uncovered food or drink, they leave behind traces of their presence that can affect anyone who subsequently consumes these items, sometimes manifesting as unexplained illness, disturbed sleep, or spiritual oppression. The second invitation that echoed through Ahmed's flat every night came through his habit of whistling while he worked late into the evening hours. This innocent expression of contentment or absent-minded focus carried consequences he never imagined, for Islamic scholars throughout the centuries have taught that jinn communicate through similar sounds and frequencies. When we whistle after sunset, we are not simply making music for our own enjoyment. We are broadcasting signals that entities of the unseen realm recognize as communication attempts, as calls that might be directed toward them, as invitations to respond or investigate the source. The frequency and tone of human whistling fall within ranges that the jinn use for their own communications, creating the spiritual equivalent of accidentally dialing a phone number and reaching an unknown party who might decide to trace the call back to its source. Ahmed's innocent evening whistles had been answered, though he had no idea that the responses came from invisible listeners who had begun taking an interest in his activities, his schedule, and his spiritual state. A sister from Malaysia discovered this principle the hard way when her habit of whistling during evening walks was met with whistles in return from empty air, sounds that seemed to come from no visible source, but carried an unmistakable quality of intelligence and intent. The nights that followed brought sleep paralysis, shadowy figures at her bedside, and the terrifying realization that she had unknowingly entered into communication with entities she could not see, but who could see her perfectly. The third invitation that Ahmed was extending to unseen visitors reflected back at him every night through the large uncovered mirror that dominated one wall of his bedroom. This seemingly decorative choice carried spiritual implications he had never considered, for mirrors in Islamic understanding are more than simple reflective surfaces. They become portals, gateways, and observation points that allow entities from other dimensions to peer into our world with unusual clarity. During daylight hours, when the spiritual atmosphere is naturally more protected and the jinn are less active, mirrors function primarily as we expect them to. But as darkness falls and the barriers between worlds grow thin, these reflective surfaces take on characteristics that transform them into windows between realms. The positioning of Ahmed's bedroom mirror created a perfect observation point from which unseen entities could watch him in his most vulnerable moments. While he slept, while he changed clothes, while he performed his private acts of worship. Night after night, beings of smokeless fire had been using this reflective gateway to study his habits, his spiritual state, his moments of strength and weakness. The mirror had become their television screen, providing entertainment and information about a human who had unknowingly invited their attention through his spiritual carelessness. One woman in Germany endured months of escalating nightmares, each featuring a shadowy figure that seemed to emerge from her bedroom mirror, until the night she heard breathing behind her and saw the reflection move independently of any physical presence. The moment she shattered that mirror, the disturbances ceased completely, confirming what Islamic teachings had warned about for centuries. Your bedroom, that sanctuary where you surrender to the vulnerability of sleep, transforms after sunset into something far more profound than a simple resting place. It becomes a spiritual battlefield where the eternal struggle between divine protection and unseen interference unfolds with consequences that ripple through your dreams, your physical well-being, and the very fabric of your spiritual existence. When you close your eyes without proper spiritual armor, you enter a state of profound vulnerability that entities of smokeless fire recognize as an opportunity to exert influence, to whisper into your subconscious mind, and to test the boundaries of what they can accomplish in a realm where your conscious defenses have been lowered by the natural surrender of sleep. The fourth invitation that Ahmed was unknowingly extending came through his habit of playing loud music and entertainment well into the dark hours, transforming his flat into a beacon that attracted unseen listeners like moths drawn to flame. The rhythmic beats, the electronic frequencies, the emotional intensity of modern entertainment create vibrations that resonate through both the physical and spiritual realms, announcing to any jinn in the vicinity that this location pulses with activity, energy, and the kind of sensory stimulation they find irresistibly attractive. Islamic scholars throughout the centuries have observed that certain types of music and entertainment, particularly when experienced after sunset, create atmospheric conditions that the jinn find conducive to their own gatherings and activities. A group of young men in Morocco discovered this principle when their late-night music sessions in a forested area began attracting more than just human listeners. They reported seeing a woman by the roadside who vanished the moment their car passed her location, and one member of the group awoke the next morning with unexplained bruises covering his arms and back. Silent testimonies to nocturnal encounters he could not remember, but whose physical evidence could not be denied. The combination of loud music in isolated areas after dark had created the perfect conditions for jinn manifestation and interference, turning what should have been innocent entertainment into an invitation for supernatural interaction. The fifth, and perhaps most dangerous invitation that Ahmed was broadcasting every night, arose from his casual conversations about supernatural experiences, ghost stories, and unexplained phenomena that he shared with friends during their evening discussions. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, warned with profound wisdom, "Do not sit in roadways, for they are gathering places of devils." This guidance extends beyond physical locations to include the spiritual roadways we create through our conversations, our thoughts, and our casual engagement with topics that naturally attract the attention of entities who are intimately involved in the very phenomena we discuss so carelessly. When we speak about the jinn, about supernatural encounters, about unexplained mysteries during the hours when these beings are most active, we make ourselves known to them in ways that can have consequences far beyond our immediate understanding. Our words become signals broadcast across the unseen realm, announcing our awareness of their existence, our curiosity about their activities, and potentially our availability for interaction. A young boy in Pakistan learned this lesson when sharing ghost stories with his friends after dark led to a night of terrifying experiences. Awakening to find himself choking on invisible hands, his room filled with whispers that seemed to emanate from every corner, and scratches appearing on his back that served as a grim reminder that some topics carry spiritual weight that demands careful handling. That feeling of being pinned down during sleep, completely unable to move your limbs or voice your terror while sensing a malevolent presence pressing down upon your chest, represents far more than the medical phenomenon that modern science dismisses as sleep paralysis. This experience, known across cultures and throughout history, often manifests as spiritual oppression that occurs when our natural defenses have been compromised by spiritual carelessness, when we have unknowingly invited attention from entities whose intentions toward humanity range from mischievous to malevolent. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, revealed the spiritual mechanics behind our dream states when he taught us that good dreams come from Allah while nightmares originate from Shaitan, illuminating the reality that our sleeping minds become battlegrounds where opposing forces compete for influence over our thoughts, emotions, and spiritual condition. Without proper protection, sleep transforms from a blessed respite into a vulnerable state where negative forces can whisper suggestions into our subconscious minds, plant seeds of fear and doubt that blossom into anxiety and spiritual disturbance, and gradually erode our sense of peace and security in our own homes. The dreams that should refresh our souls become vehicles for psychological manipulation. The rest that should restore our strength becomes a source of exhaustion and spiritual drain, and the sanctuary that should shelter us becomes a crossroads where we encounter influences that can affect our waking thoughts and behaviors in ways we never consciously recognize. But within this sobering reality of spiritual vulnerability lies the most radiant manifestation of Allah's infinite mercy and divine wisdom. Our Creator, who knows every hidden danger and every subtle threat that exists within the realms He has fashioned, has not abandoned us to navigate these spiritual complexities without guidance, protection, or hope. Through the blessed revelation of the Noble Quran and the comprehensive teachings delivered through His final messenger, we have been equipped with tools of protection that surpass any earthly defense system in their effectiveness, their accessibility, and their divine guarantee of success for those who implement them with sincere faith and consistent practice. The transformation that occurs when we properly fortify our spiritual boundaries transcends mere protection from supernatural interference. It represents a fundamental shift in our relationship with the unseen realm, with our own spiritual development, and with the divine presence that surrounds and encompasses all of creation. The same bedroom that once felt haunted by unexplained presences becomes a sanctuary where angels gather to witness our remembrance of Allah. The same sleep that once brought nightmares and disturbance becomes a peaceful journey through dreams that carry guidance, comfort, and spiritual nourishment. The same home that once felt vulnerable to unseen influences becomes a fortress of faith, where divine protection creates an atmosphere so spiritually pure that harmful entities cannot approach, cannot interfere, and cannot disturb the peace that Allah has decreed for those who seek refuge in His mighty protection. The most breathtaking aspect of Islamic protection against the jinn and all forms of spiritual harm lies not in its complexity or exclusivity, but in its profound simplicity and universal accessibility to every sincere believer. You require no expensive talismans crafted from rare materials, no complicated rituals that demand years of study to master, no intermediaries who claim special powers or secret knowledge unavailable to ordinary Muslims. The divine arsenal that Allah has placed at your disposal consists entirely of sincere faith, expressed through the beautiful words He has revealed, and the blessed practices His messenger demonstrated, tools so powerful that they have successfully protected believers for over 14 centuries across every continent, culture, and circumstance where Islam has taken root. Begin your spiritual fortification with Ayat Al Kursi, that magnificent throne verse which stands as the most powerful protection contained within the noble Quran, a passage whose recitation before sleep carries with it a divine promise that transforms the entire atmosphere of your resting place. When these sacred words flow from your tongue with sincere intention and genuine faith, Allah assigns a guardian angel specifically to watch over you until the light of dawn breaks across the horizon. No shaitan can penetrate this angelic protection. No whisper of evil can disturb your peaceful rest. No harm from any source in the seen or unseen realms can touch your tranquil slumber under the watchful care of this divinely appointed protector. Follow this foundational protection with the recitation of the last 3 chapters of the Quran, Al-Ikhlas, which declares the absolute unity and transcendence of Allah, Al-Falaq, which seeks refuge from all forms of evil that emerge with darkness, and An-Nas, which provides shelter from the whispered suggestions that poison human hearts and minds. These chapters, collectively known as the Muawwidhat, or the verses of seeking refuge, weave together to create an impenetrable spiritual shield that addresses every category of harm that might approach a believer from any direction, whether the threat originates from human enemies, jinn interference, or the subtle manipulations of Shaitan himself. Ahmed, the London brother whose nightly torment at exactly 3:17 a.m. had robbed him of peace for weeks, discovered the transformative power of these protections when he finally implemented them with desperate sincerity. Within 3 nights of consistently reciting Ayat Al Kursi and the Muawwidhat before sleep, his nights underwent a complete transformation. The bone-chilling cold that had characterized his 3 a.m. awakenings gave way to comfortable warmth. The terrifying whispers that had haunted his darkness were replaced by peaceful silence. The oppressive presence that had made his bedroom feel like a prison became replaced by a sense of divine protection so tangible that his sleep became deeper, more refreshing, and filled with dreams that brought comfort rather than terror. The Malaysian sister, who had innocently responded to invisible whistles in the night air, experienced equally dramatic results when she combined these powerful recitations with practical adjustments to her nighttime habits. Cover her mirrors to eliminate spiritual gateways, avoiding all forms of whistling after sunset, and maintaining consistent remembrance of Allah throughout her evening routine. Her episodes of sleep paralysis, those terrifying experiences of awakening to find shadowy figures looming over her helpless form, ceased completely within days of implementing these blessed protections, replaced by nights of such peaceful rest that she began to look forward to bedtime rather than dreading the approach of darkness. Your nightly routine, when properly structured according to prophetic guidance, should encompass every aspect of your preparation for sleep, creating layers of protection that address both the physical and spiritual dimensions of your resting environment. Seek Allah's protection before entering the bathroom, acknowledging that these spaces naturally attract jinn activity and require conscious spiritual preparation. Cover all food and drink throughout your home before sunset arrives, eliminating the invitations that uncovered sustenance broadcasts to unseen visitors. Close all doors while mentioning Allah's name, creating both physical and spiritual barriers that define your protected space. Sleep on your right side, as the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, consistently demonstrated, positioning your body in the manner that he knew would provide optimal spiritual and physical benefits during the vulnerable hours of rest. These practices represent far more than burdensome religious obligations imposed upon believers to test their compliance or devotion. They constitute precious gifts of protection that Allah, in His infinite mercy and comprehensive knowledge of all dangers, has provided to transform your entire relationship with the night hours, with your sleep experience, and with your sense of security in your own home. When implemented with understanding, consistency, and sincere faith, these simple acts of remembrance and obedience create an atmosphere of divine presence so powerful that your bedroom becomes a place where angels love to gather, where peaceful dreams replace nightmares, and where you can surrender to sleep with complete confidence in Allah's protection. As we arrive at the culmination of this profound spiritual journey through the hidden realities that govern our nighttime experiences, you find yourself standing at a crossroads whose significance extends far beyond this single moment of decision. The choice you make tonight will determine not only how you experience the approaching hours of darkness, but will establish a pattern that could transform every night for the remainder of your life on this earth. The unseen world operates according to laws as consistent and predictable as the physical laws that govern the visible realm, and these spiritual forces do not pause their activities simply because human beings remain unaware of their presence or unprepared for their influence. The jinn, who move freely through our world after sunset, do not request permission before they examine our spiritual defenses, test our vulnerabilities, or respond to the invitations we unconsciously broadcast through our habits and choices. They simply act according to their nature, their capabilities, and the opportunities that our spiritual carelessness creates for them to exert influence in our lives. They observe our nightly routines with the same consistency with which we perform them, noting every pattern of protection or vulnerability, every moment of remembrance or forgetfulness, every signal that indicates whether we walk under divine protection or stumble through the darkness spiritually exposed to whatever influences might seek to affect our dreams, our peace, and our spiritual well-being. Tonight, before you close your eyes and surrender to the vulnerability that sleep naturally brings, you possess a choice whose implications reach into eternity itself. Will you align yourself with the vast majority of humanity who encounter this knowledge of spiritual protection, acknowledge its truth and importance, perhaps even feel moved by its urgency and relevance to their own experiences, but ultimately allow it to pass through their consciousness without transforming their actions, continuing to sleep night after night without implementing the divine safeguards that could shield them from unseen interference and spiritual disturbance? Or will you demonstrate the wisdom and courage to join that small percentage of truly conscious believers who not only receive divine guidance, but immediately translate that knowledge into consistent practice, who understand that spiritual protection is not a theoretical concept to be admired from a distance, but a practical necessity to be implemented with the same urgency we would apply to physical safety measures? Will you become one of those rare individuals who experience the profound peace, the deep rest, and the spiritual security that comes from sleeping under Allah's direct guardianship, protected by angels assigned specifically to watch over those who remember their Creator before surrendering to sleep? The truth that confronts every human being, regardless of their religious background or level of belief, stands stark and undeniable in its simplicity. The entities of the unseen realm, whose existence has been confirmed by divine revelation, do not concern themselves with our theological opinions about their reality. They do not pause their activities to debate with skeptics or wait for scientific validation of their existence. They simply continue their interactions with our world according to the spiritual laws that govern their nature, responding to the signals we send, the invitations we extend, and the vulnerabilities we create through our conscious choices and unconscious habits. What captures their attention is not whether we believe in their existence, but whether we have taken the necessary steps to protect ourselves from their potential interference. What determines their ability to influence our lives is not our academic understanding of supernatural phenomena, but whether our spiritual doors remain locked through remembrance of Allah or swing wide open through neglect of the protective measures He has provided. What shapes their capacity to disturb our peace is not our philosophical position on metaphysical questions, but whether we have implemented the practical safeguards that create barriers between their realm and our vulnerable moments of sleep. Starting tonight, you possess access to the identical keys of spiritual safety that have been tested, proven, and relied upon successfully for more than 14 centuries of Islamic history. The same protective recitations that shielded the blessed companions of the Prophet from spiritual harm during their dangerous journeys and vulnerable moments are available to you in your own bedroom. The same divine words that created impenetrable barriers around the righteous scholars who dedicated their lives to preserving and teaching Islamic knowledge can create identical barriers around your sleeping form. The same angelic protection that has watched over millions of believers throughout history, across every continent, culture, and century where Islam has been practiced, can be summoned to guard your rest through the simple act of sincere recitation before sleep. As you prepare for sleep tonight and every night that follows, remember that Allah's mercy encompasses absolutely everything that exists within His creation, including the comprehensive protection He provides from dangers we cannot perceive, threats we cannot anticipate, and influences we cannot detect through our limited human senses. Implement these blessed teachings not because fear compels you to seek safety from supernatural dangers, but because love for the one who created both the seen and unseen worlds inspires you to follow the guidance He has provided for your benefit, your peace, and your spiritual development. Let your final conscious act each night become a moment of seeking refuge in Allah, the Most High, whose protection surpasses any earthly security system in its completeness and reliability. Let your last thoughts before sleep carry you into dreams filled with divine guidance, peaceful imagery, and spiritual nourishment that refreshes both your body and your soul. Let your first experience each dawn be the joy of awakening under Allah's continued protection, with gratitude for a night of peaceful rest and confidence that another day begins under the guardianship of the one who never sleeps, never forgets, and never abandons those who remember Him in their moments of vulnerability. The darkness may hold mysteries that human understanding cannot fully penetrate, secrets that exist beyond the reach of our physical senses, and realities that operate according to laws we are only beginning to comprehend. But with Allah as your guardian, with His blessed words as your shield, and with His angels as your protectors, you need never walk through any darkness in fear, never surrender to any sleep and anxiety, and never face any night with doubt about your safety under the protection of the one who holds absolute authority over every entity in both the seen and unseen realms of His magnificent creation.